Welcome to Disunion, the Government Union Report, the podcast where we delve into the ever-evolving landscape of public sector labor policy and law. J.C. Bowman is the Executive Director and CEO of the Professional Educators of Tennessee. It's a professional association for Tennessee teachers and other educators. He's also a former public school teacher. He taught high school social sciences and special ed for 13 years. J.C., thank you for joining me.
My privilege, David. Glad to be with you.
Well, as listeners may know, the Commonwealth Foundation puts out a 50-state report every 2 years that grades the states based on their public sector labor policies. Last year, the state of Tennessee received an A+ grade, and part of that had to do with their unique approach to workplace representation for teachers, something they call cooperative conferencing. I invited JC on the podcast to tell us a little bit about how that model works and whether it might be a fit for other states. So JC, I do want to learn about why Tennessee adopted this model, but I guess first, it would probably help to briefly describe what it is, collaborative conferencing, and then the roles that labor unions play and the roles that your organization plays under that model.
Yeah, that's a lot to unpack. So let's start with this. You know, we recognized a long time ago, I was a classroom teacher, and I just realized that the union did not represent me. And so I became a founder of Professional Educators of Tennessee. I actually grew out of a move from Ronald Reagan in 1976. I'm not going to get into the whole professional educators movement, but I will tell you it's been around a while. And so we've been there, and then Professional Educators of Tennessee kind of just was a small group of people. They were just, non-union, but the union had a strong stranglehold, maybe a better word, on politics in Tennessee. And so, we were pretty much locked out of it. And I did a lot of activity as a member. I was very active. I ended up becoming a board member of Professional Educators of Tennessee. And fast forward the time, I went on and had a career, did a bunch of other things, and did that. But in looking at it, I've never gave up the idea of making sure that everybody had equal, footing on the same ground to able to speak for their profession. So when I came back, I became executive director in 2010. And so I've been here now 14 years. And one of my objectives was to make sure that our teachers were represented. And the union has continued to decline in membership in Tennessee. And they've gone downhill. And I don't mean that in a negative like skiing, but they've lost members across the board. Whereas we've grown, we've all kind of peaked out to a certain level. I think ultimately, like you look at somewhere like Texas, which has 5 viable teachers organizations, I think you're going to see more of that in the future, representing different niches within education. And so, with that, they're just recognized. Collective bargaining began in 1895. People forget that. And it was mainly in the private sector. So Beatrice Webb was the lady who created it and came up with this whole concept of collective bargaining. And it worked in the private sector, but it wasn't until public sector unions came along and then started reapplying this into there that they did that. But we recognized that what it ended up becoming was it hurt the teaching profession. It drove a wedge between teachers and employers and schools and school districts. It drove a wedge between everybody. It was a divisive tool. And we spent most of our time arguing. And I personally got involved in it. And in my home county of Bradley County, from where I'm from, which is lower southeast Tennessee. And we got involved in it. And we hadn't had a raise in a number of years. And I'm driving down the road one day and I hear, teachers turned down $3,000 raise. I'm like, why would we do that? If we just had taken that, and there's a lot of moving pieces to it. So fast forward, collaborative conferencing came in play in 2011. A state senator named Jack Johnson and I don't recall the representative off the top of my head, but Senator Johnson's still there. And he became an advocate for making sure that everybody's voice was heard. And rather than making it getting people to the table, having civil discourse, what's in the best interest of public education, and how we can work together to accomplish those objectives. Simple thing. The union actually is interesting, has embraced this now. They actually like it. They for the first 5 to 7 years of it being enacted, they were criticizing me, hanging this around my neck, and doing that, and that's fine. It is a modern approach to the way that we do labor relations with teachers. We have a voice at the table, but a lot of districts just choose not to do it because we can go sit down with the superintendent, bring a list of ideas and things that we can work on. And each district is different. Surprisingly, and I tell people this all the time, salary is an important factor, and we do want higher salary. We're never going to turn higher salary down. But believe it or not, it can rank anywhere from 1st to 10th on the list of an educator. Student behavior is the main objective that we hear today, is how do we get that, and how do we get support from and so we've constantly for the last decade at the state level worked on addressing student behavior issues and worked with the General Assembly to address those issues, and worked with superintendents across the state on how to do it. But I know you have a lot of questions, and would this work in Pennsylvania? Absolutely. And I think it levels the playing ground, and there's no longer the identification of one association or one union or one organization representing. We represent everybody. We're all at the table. And for us, like Putnam County, there's 15 members on this committee. 3 of them are my members, 3 of them are union members, and 1 of them is a non-affiliated member. So they sit down with 7 members or 8 members of the school board every year, and they work together to address various working conditions, employment. There's various issues like grievance procedures, teacher salary, other things that they address that's can be approached every year. And so it's worked out really well. Like Putnam County is a classic example in Tennessee of someone who's made this work really well.
So you said 3 members. So you're not on that committee, is that right?
No, we are. We have 3 of our teachers that are on that committee. They have 3 members from the union that are on there. There's only really the TEA affiliate, the NEA affiliate is the one that has most of the members here in Tennessee. So they have 3 members, so it's 6. And then there's 1 that's not affiliated with anything. So that's 7 educators that are on this committee that work on working conditions across the board.
That's really what I'm asking. They're educators, so it's not you.
Yeah, no, it's not us.
Yeah.
In fact, we downplay the whole concept of that. It's not supposed to be. That's the one disadvantage that we found, is that when the comptroller looked at it, they are still writing some of the MOUs in the same vernacular, some verbiage that they used when they did collective bargaining. And so, trying to make it, well, this union it's not a contract with the union. It's a contract with the employees within the district, and they have to be professional employees.
So I don't think I appreciated that part of it. When I read the law, it almost appeared as if the organization, like your organization and the union, could pick who would be on the committee, but that they would, by and large, pick their own professional negotiators. You're saying it's the educators in the local level who get to sit down with their employer.
Exactly. And what we've found is most superintendents across the state are more than willing to sit down with their employees. A happy employee is a better work environment, is a better system. And so they can sit down and talk with them.
I'd imagine the superintendent also learns a lot about what reality is on the ground, as distinguished from collective bargaining, where at times you've got 2 people who really don't know anything about the reality on the ground in the schools, who are the lead negotiators for either side. Unions can obviously staff it with some local representatives, but that can be a big problem with collective bargaining. So let me go back. You've got 3 from your organization. You've got 3 from the union. How do you determine, the proportionate representation for each group?
Yeah, so basically you get 15% of the vote. That's 1 person. So the numbers work out. It's 15, 15, and 15. So that's, if we get 45, they get 45, the other 10% is unaffiliated, they would get a position. So that's kind of how they've done it in the past. And it's worked out really well. And in some cases, like we may have 2 and they have 4, in other cases. Well, we still have a disadvantage, David, for us, that our folks are adamantly, they do not like the adversarial bargaining piece of this. They don't like adversarial. They want to work together. Most of the people that we find that go into teaching are there because they love kids. They want to teach kids. They're not there to do some of the, and what ends up happening is that exactly what you kind of alluded to, but what ends up happening is that these people that get on these committees are all interested in expanding the union narrative, not necessarily what's in the best interest of the educator. In this case, you're putting the educator first and foremost. And I think that that's the way that it should be done.
So you say there's a vote, and each member on this committee is worth 15% of the vote. Who's voting? Is it all the educators?
Professional employees, yes.
Okay, so those are, at least in my parlance, teachers, right? Yes. Not the support staff, but the teachers. And they vote. How often do they vote to, have this collaborative conference?
So you have to send notification in October that you're wanting to try this. The MOU can go for up to 3 years. So usually every 3 years there's a vote, and we try to do a good job of tracking. What we found is that because we can do an inroad, and not just us, they can do it as well. Anybody can. I mean, if we have another thing that we use, we actually like better, called Educational Leaders Conference, where we go in and meet with our folks one-on-one. Like, we sit down with the superintendent, we take educators, we've polled our members, we surveyed them, we go in, share information. And sometimes those do an end run and actually are more beneficial to the superintendent. I mean, if we're providing data, here's what your teachers think, here's what's their concern, and sharing with that. So it's another way of doing it. So I think it's got one more metamorphosis, one more change it needs to go through a little bit. But by and large, this is a step forward of collective bargaining. Way easier. It brings more people to the table, and you hear more distinct voices. The more voices you hear, I think the better educators are represented.
Okay, so there's a notice. It just is a timeline here. There's a notice that goes out. Does it go out from the school or from the teachers, or either?
Yeah, it can go out from either. I mean, they'll start pushing it that we're doing it. We send notification to our educators that in the district that collective bar or collaborative conferencing may begin, and if in fact you do this, we'd encourage you to vote for our organization to represent you.
So the notices go out. There's a vote among all the educators as to which organizations should represent them, and then instead of a winner takes all, it's a proportionate representation. So that if your organization gets 15%, then they'll have one member from that organization come and sit. It was interesting to read about the unaffiliated vote. I don't know who votes for unaffiliated. I guess people who hate the organizations, right? But they will be able to vote for a single unaffiliated member to be their representative.
Yep.
Okay.
Or
interesting.
They can get appointed by, so who selects them? I mean, in our case, we usually obviously look at people that for example, if we have 3, we look for a elementary school teacher that may be active, middle, and the problem is finding people with time.
Sure, yeah.
Do you have time to do this? And I mean, we've had teachers that have called us that have done it for a couple of years and said, I'm out.
Right, yeah. This is a volunteer position, I guess. And
yes, not unpaid.
What does it look like? So they sit down, and who starts? How do they start talking about how work should look?
Well, and we think of it as interest-based bargaining. That's another term that you'll see thrown around with this, and they'll share with okay, let's survey our members, let's find out what's the issues. Here's the top 10 issues. Let me throw one at you. A good example: Coffee County down here down in the mountains, a little bit further south of Nashville. One of the number one issues was teachers in the school did not have a place, at the high school, did not have a place to secure their purses. 82% of teachers in general are female. They couldn't put their purses anywhere. So that was one of the top issues that kind of surprised us as it popped up. And we went in, sat down with the superintendent, shared with her, here's something. The next day, they put lockers in the school so that the teachers could lock their purses up. I mean, it's a hazard. They walk around, they have to break a fight up. They put their purse down, some kid gets in their purse. So that was taken care of in one day. But teacher salaries are a different animal because you have timelines on that. You have to submit your budget in March in Tennessee to the county commission. The county commission then votes in May or whatever what the local portion of what is going to come up with and all that. So it takes time to do it. These people operate under a world where you think, I think sometimes that, well, I want a 5% raise and I'm going to get it in 3 weeks. Well, that's not how it works. It's with the money that's allocated and the money that's available. And that's why the advantage of sitting in the room together and going, look, we have 5% money that can come in that we can utilize for salary. The second part's benefits. So if you spend it all on salary, you're not going to get it in benefits. Maybe benefits are a higher priority to you. And a lot of districts, because back to the 82% of our teachers being female, one of the highest things we've discovered is childcare. And so, and teachers have weird schedules. They have to get there at 7:30 sometimes earlier. They get there, they're there late sometimes. So having a daycare right there on site would be a great advantage. And they have the facilities, they can put a place in there and can host it. Use some of those resources for that rather than salary. And it seems to be working in a lot of places. And so we think that it's a win-win for educators. It's a win-win for taxpayers. It's a win-win for all. And it actually helps, I think. I tell people all the time, whether we like it or not, we are in the public relations business. And we've got to make sure that we're not sending this message. And we're going to go, for Tennessee, we've had anti-strike since like 1968. So we've not had the strike ability to go on strike. We oppose it. We believe that, teacher strikes actually have an adverse condition and actually hurt children. And that's the last thing we want to do. So our members have always understood that we oppose, striking, work stoppages. We think that's harmful. And for unions, they don't have to think about that. And whereas for us, public relations matter.
Sure. Well, yeah, there was an interesting thing here that happened here in Pennsylvania a few years ago. Pennsylvania has tons of teacher strikes. It's legal, and for whatever reason, unions have really embraced teacher strikes as a way to get what they want. They got a bad rap for that, and so they got a scholar to put together a study that said teacher strikes don't hurt children's education. It almost seems like a very bad strategy in the sense that kids missing instruction somehow doesn't hurt their education. These are the teachers. You would think the more valuable they are, the more it would hurt students when they're not in the classroom teaching. But anyway, that's an aside. So you say it's working. This is a model that's working in Tennessee. Do educators perceive that it's working? Like, is this something that they are happy with?
Well, it's like I said, the union itself is starting to really embrace it. They think it is a way to get back in the, I think what they want to do is continue it until our legislature was bright red. We've had a Republican governor for the last 16 years. We've had basically since 2010, we've had Republican legislature control of Republicans. And so I do think that, and if it swings back, I think they would like to bring back collective bargaining, exclusive representation, all that the stuff entails. The exclusive representation is another piece of that I think that really is been really hard to accept for a lot of our teachers because they just don't feel represented.
Sure, yeah. That's that kind of all or nothing approach to collective bargaining, where you've got a representative that If they get a majority of those voting to approve it, then they are the sole representative. You've got a different model where there's competition in that, and the competition, I guess, takes place on every time that a collaborative conferencing comes up. You've got to prove yourself to the teachers, including your members, and the union does too. I had kind of an embarrassing exchange with a Tennessee representative recently. It was a very public setting, and she asked about whether some of the reforms that I was talking about might work in a state like Tennessee where they don't have any unions. And I said, well, actually, Tennessee does have public sector unions and teacher unions in particular. From my perspective, they're alive and well, but what they do is they take a role in the collaborative conferencing model, so that they are not the exclusive representative, and that was absolute news to her. So I guess the unions have taken a step back, but the fact that they're embracing this model now would seem to me the pathway forward for any teacher union in Tennessee.
No, I think that's right. And again, but I expect more people to come to the table eventually. Like I said, Texas has 5 groups. We'll see other groups come up. And quite honestly, we welcome them. I've told one group that was entertaining the idea of coming to Tennessee, I said, come. I said, guess what? I said, you can't do what I can do, but we're welcome to have more the merrier, because I recognize I don't represent every teacher in the state. I mean, as much as I would like to, I recognize that people have difference of opinions. We don't give money to political candidates. We never are going to endorse political candidates. It's a message from my membership. The one thing that we find repetitively throughout when we survey our members, they thank us for not doing that. We're smart enough to vote for whom we want to vote for. We don't need you telling us who to vote for. And I appreciate that.
Well, and you're state-based too, so some of the problems that unions run into when they're affiliated with a national teachers union like the National Education Association is that the NEA takes a big chunk out of the dues and then sends it to places like Wisconsin, where they've recently had an election for a Supreme Court judge, and then to Utah, where right now the NEA is throwing about $500,000 into an organization to reverse a recent reform that we talked about on this podcast with the legislator who sponsored it. That's not going to benefit people in Tennessee or Pennsylvania or New York. Even if they love their union, why should the union send their money out to Utah or to Wisconsin? These are battles that they don't need to fight. So we've been very positive so far about this model. I have to ask, what are the drawbacks? What's not working, and how might this be something teachers would not appreciate?
Well, for us, it's a couple things. Like differentiated pay is a good example. It's prohibited from discussing it, and we've moved more to differentiated pay. Those are other things. Grants, when grants come in, and grants are, we're talking about block granting federal money to the states now. That's the federal direct. So those dollars would be excluded from the conversation. And my take would be you would need to have those discussions. Anything that involves a salary, I think you could discuss it. I mean, you see time after time that people may get these federal grants, and all of a sudden they're getting $330,000 a year salary, and you're like, how did they get that high? How did their salary jump up to that high? Well, it's a federal grant program that they're getting or whatever. And so, I mean, I do think that those need to be on the table for more discussion. There's other areas there. Trying to remember.
These are just categories that aren't, for whatever reason, they're prohibited from collaborative conferencing. Okay.
Well, they were moving toward more like merit pay activities, and I tell people all the time on merit pay, like there's a bill coming through the legislature in Tennessee right now on merit pay. Well, it's going to make it permissive. Well, number one, it's already permissive. You could already do it. It's not like, I don't know. Sometimes legislators just reinvent the wheel 15 times and they don't even know what they've already passed. So,
yeah, that's true.
so we're sitting there going, all right, whatever. But, and I called and I like the representative that's carrying the bill. We disagree some on some things. It's like everybody else. we have civil discussion. I have a great conversation with him. And I texted him. I go, look, this is permissive, right? He was permissive. I said, okay. I said, I've never seen a merit pay program that's worked completely. In theory, it sounds great. We like it. And the idea, if we want to pay more people more money, great. We want that. However, I've not seen one that's worked completely for everybody.
Sure.
And so, but they're going to do it. And I go, maybe you stumble into one. Maybe there's one that goes, hey, this is one that everybody likes and we'll go do it. I don't think that you're going to see any districts. I talked to a large district yesterday and they said they're not going to participate in it just simply because of it takes more work on their end to do the work, to do the merit piece of it.
True. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, that's why some school districts really want collective bargaining. In some ways, it makes their life better, easier, not necessarily for the kids, but for them. But collaborative conferencing is a different approach where you don't have to go all the way there to get the benefits of collective bargaining. You've got a pay scale that teachers have approved to some degree, and then you've got direct conversations with educators on the ground who can give you a sense for what's really desired among the employees. I guess what happens if there's not an agreement at collaborative conferencing?
Yeah, no, so that happens a lot. I mean, what ends up happening is like some of the law. Here's the other thing: is there's been several lawsuits filed by the union against in this case. I got drug into a lawsuit because I sent one email to a superintendent. The superintendent texted me and said, "We're doing collaborative conferencing, balloting. Do you guys intend to be included in the ballot?" Absolutely, we would like to be included. We got like 40% of the vote, so we were happy with that. And but they filed lawsuit because they didn't like how the vote turned out. And so they had another re-election. They did it, and the vote came out the same way. It's just, and that's the other thing is that the litigation piece to stuff. They want to. It's always the same thing, David. It never stops. Any new idea that comes along, stop it cold, water it down, accept it. That's the 3-step strategy for change. And you name the event. It's almost every policy I know deal with. You come along and stop it cold, water it down, finally you accept it. And so that's kind of the strategy that the union, I think, has adopted here. And there's a couple other pieces to this I think that are still, in my case, my teachers still have a bad taste over collective bargaining. They didn't like it. They didn't like the adversarial thing. They didn't like going to the grocery store and somebody saying, hey, why don't you guys take that salary increase that's been given? And it's just like, I just want to teach school. I mean, I hear that. I bet you every single day of my life that I've been in this job, I hear from a teacher going, I just want to teach. Leave me alone in the classroom to teach. And they don't want to get active. They don't want to get involved in a lot of things. They know they need liability insurance. They know they want benefits. We offer our benefits are, and I'm going to say this right here, and bring it on if they disagree. But our benefits are way better than the unions. And I'll put that against any time because we've worked really hard in securing those 3-legged stool for an employee membership, and we got great legal for our members and liability insurance. So we're taking care of our members, and those are the things they're concerned about. They don't want somebody coming in suing them, taking their house that they've worked for 30 years.
Sure. So, I imagine the unions are the unions in Tennessee affiliated with a national organization like the NEA?
You do have an AFT subset in Cumberland County here, not Cumberland, Campbell County. It's the only place in Tennessee that AFT is located.
Well, that's a liability for them. I mean, the cost of the typical union membership includes all these overhead costs that mostly have to do with the national or the state organizations, not the locals. And so that gives you guys a real opportunity. The benefits themselves that unions offer are typically not super expensive for them to offer, so that, but dues are outrageous.
Yeah, dues here are easily around 700, could be higher. We've seen in some cases much higher, like in Knoxville. But the NEA is active here. And they had a division in Memphis. Memphis is going through, you want a case study one day, go look at Memphis. The union president at the time, Keith Williams, who now is on the school board and has been, that's a whole nother thing, whether the state's going to take over Shelby County Schools, where he's on the board of. But it's interesting that they actually pulled out of the TEA. They pulled out their state version and opened up. They're still affiliated with so the NEA has two groups out in Shelby County, which is Memphis. And so it's interesting to watch what's going on out there because they're at war with each other. And so, when your enemy's killing each other, you let them go to town and step back and watch it. But,
So yeah, we talked about whether this could be expanded into other states. You said it would be something that could work in Pennsylvania. How would one move toward this kind of thing? Let's assume that a bill eventually has to get passed. But what are the steps before a bill can be passed on this subject?
So I think what you have to do is to educate. It's simple. It's a simple strategy, and I try to keep things being just a small town guy. I keep everything simple. It's educate, then legislate. And what you need to do is talk about interest-based bargaining. Look at it. I was going to tell you one other weakness is the training. So that may be something you want to include. Is in on the training. We had a thing that they were going to the Superintendents Association was supposed to do some of the training for this. And the funding that went along with that, the state was going to spend like $500,000 to do the training, did not materialize. They didn't include it in the budget.
You mean like training for educators to learn how bargaining works and all that kind of stuff?
What interest-based bargaining was to do. And so we had the Superintendents Association, the principal of the School Boards Association, Professional Educators of Tennessee, and the NEA affiliate. We were the four groups that were at the table as we did the study, as they talked about the training. We're still the last people that are still there, us and the School Boards Association. They've had massive turnover with the union, massive turnover with the Superintendents Association, but we've been there from the very beginning, so we understand this pretty well. And so I do think that if I would sit there, I would make sure that the interest-based bargaining training, how to do it, how to write the contracts. There was no language on how you write these contracts. And so, the contracts have to be inclusive of all employees, and it's not with the local union. It's not with a national union. It is with the employees of, pick the name, Pittsburgh School District. It's it would be with those employees, professional employees, not the Pennsylvania State Education Association.
Yeah, that would be important. Then some education is required. I assume a lot of that education in Tennessee had to do with the shortcomings of exclusive representation that you mentioned at the outset. What were the biggest ways that people were able to show exclusive representation was not working?
Well, for us, I had horror stories. Where I was able to share. I had a teacher who hung simply held up I had a flyer saying, join Professional Educators of Tennessee, a one-page flyer, a little bit, in the faculty lounge. She was reprimanded by her superintendent and for hanging a flyer, join Professional Educators of Tennessee.
At that time, I guess you were in an association, but you weren't involved at all in bargaining. You were,
yeah. No, we left it alone. For us, it was like, we could go around the corner and we could go meet with the superintendent one-on-one. It was there's always other routes that you can go to sit down with school board members and inform. They don't want conflict. And once they understand we're all on the same side, and the goal is to educate children, and our objective is to make sure kids are getting the best education that they can get, and we're on the same side it makes sense that we would want to work together. And so it just makes sense to do that. But that was an example of how it did. And and we told these stories. We got newspapers and television stations that came out and covered stuff like this, and it made the news. We were able to share with, and I will say and sometimes it's the small things, David. And I will say that for me, I was in the Marine Corps, and so I want to say that it so happened that the chairman of education was also a Marine Corps veteran. And so when we sat down and talked, and I shared with her how we were being excluded, and I go, and you know how we were in the Marines, we were the last to be considered. And she goes, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I said, all I'm asking, and I've never asked for one thing more than they have, all I want is to level the playing field. Put us on a level playing field, we'll beat them every time. And I said, and I think if you could do that, and it's coming to that point. It's a slow growth. We have to live within our budget. They don't. They can go out and get money from their national. I don't have that privilege. We don't go out to accept money from third-party groups or anything like that. We're all member-driven, and it's hard sometimes to say, I'd like to spend another $10,000 in marketing, but I don't have it. And so that's kind of the way to do it. But, we spend time at the legislature. We educate our people. We keep them abreast. But I think that they get that in today's time and age, I think people understand that we have to make education the priority. And if we keep going to war with our own people who are funding us, our parents. I mean, my daughter teaches is in another state, and she shared with me a letter that was sent to her by a school, and at her child's school and my grandson's school, and I'm like. I said, this is completely inappropriate. So we don't involve parents in these things. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't involve parents? I mean, that's what you're there for the kid, and the next level is the parent. Involve the parent in as much detail as you can. My daughter, who does not share our worldview, my daughter is much to the more moderate and more to the left and everything, but she was angry over that. I mean, you're going to lose a person who would generally side with you, and that's what happens. And we lose these people every day because we got to spend more time in salesmanship and in making sure that people understand the necessity of education. And we need to really, I tell people all this, but you better believe what you're saying. It can't just be rhetoric and words. You really got to get in there and make people understand that we care about kids, and that is our focus.
Great stuff, JC. Well, where can people find out more about you and the organization?
Yeah, you can visit our website, www.proedtn.org. And and just go online and Professional Educators of Tennessee, proedtn.org, and be honored to have people check us out, see what they think. And we do an editorial once a week. Sometimes we make people mad on both sides. We're okay. And that is the other thing. We're nonpartisan, so we have a tendency to get everybody mad. But we try to look at the issues from both sides of an aisle and try to put out solutions. My mother gave me the best advice ever. If you're going to criticize something, offer a solution. And I will say that I am wrong sometimes. I'm not always right. And that's the hard part for me to learn, is that I've got to go back and go, when we did that 5 years ago, it didn't work. But this collaborative conferencing is starting to really take hold. And I think it is a modern approach. You don't need to go back to an 1895 Beatrice Webb model and think it's going to work in the 2025. It's not.
Well, great. Thank you so much for coming on and for offering this solution.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you.